Good afternoon, I'm Donald Maurice. I'm very happy to welcome you here to the NZBBC interview series. That stands for New Zealand Baby Boomer Composers, in case you were wondering. In this series we're interviewing 10 New Zealand composers born between the mid-1940s and mid-1960s, known as the Baby Boomers. 2 from Auckland, 2 from Hamilton, 2 from Wellington, 2 from Christchurch and 2 from Dunedin. The series is hosted by the New Zealand School of Music at Victoria University and SOUNZ Centre for New Zealand Music. I'm very pleased today to welcome Graeme Downes.
Thank you.
Just tell you a little bit about Graeme before I ask him some questions. To create a biography of Graeme, one must look in multiple places and listen to many interviews that he has given. And here is a brief summary of what I've managed to piece together. Graeme has been an active writer and performer for over 40 years, and after a decade of performing and recording as a rock musician in the 1980s, Graeme formally joined academia, first teaching and coordinating the music programs at the Music and Audio Institute of New Zealand in Auckland, after which he joined the staff at the University of Otago in 2000, where he introduced courses in composition and musicology and developed the country's first degree in rock music. He has described the development of the degree course at the University of Otago as a grand experiment. Part of the rationale behind the degree is that music will teach students a bunch of things that will allow one to do more than just play guitar in a rock band. It is impossible to mention Graeme without, in the same breath, referring to the Verlaines. Named after French poet Paul Verlaine, the band has been noted for their angular, difficult song structures, wordy and downbeat lyrics, unusual subject matter, all contained in an often frantic upbeat playing. The band's recorded debut was on the Dunedin Double EP, which was released by Flying Nun Records in 1982, and was the debut of several bands which would go on to be central to what we now know as the Dunedin Sound. As well as being a prolific and highly successful songwriter, Graeme has a literary side to his career, and he has strong research interests in Western art music, especially the music of Mahler and Shostakovich. Now to my first question for Graeme.
Okay.
Can you tell us a little about your childhood, where you were born, what your family life was like musically? Were you amongst siblings who played, or parents or grandparents?
I was born and raised in Pine Hill, in Dunedin, born in 1962. My father was quite influential. He was, every Sunday night, he'd let all us kids sit on the bed, my parents' bed, and he'd play sort of just what songs he knew on an acoustic guitar, and we had a sing-along. So Harry Belafonte and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So, you know, I can remember very early on sort of going, wow, that chord, that one, that packs and punch. So, you know, that was good. And my grandmother, on his side, played the piano. Not really trained. She was trained by a local, and was just more or less melody and chord symbols that she played from, sort of left-hand accompaniment to play the chords and play the tune type of thing. None of my other relatives really were much into music, but of course we had the radio, and being born in 1962 and having listened to it assiduously from as far back as I can possibly remember, I am a child of the 60s, because I was glued to the radio every chance I got, and so, you know, I can remember, you know, all the Motown stuff and the Bacharach hits, and I remember the first day that I heard Penny Lane, you know, on the radio as a small child, and going, that's it, everything's now changed. This is just, yeah. So, and then when I was 10, I think, or 11, somebody got, you might remember if you're old enough, K-Tel Records. They had a double LP called Classics 100, which was a series of bleeding chunks mainly of bits of orchestral repertoire. I don't know who got it as a Christmas present, but whoever didn't listen to it, but I started listening to it, and then my dad says, you know, you can borrow records from the public library for 20 cents a fortnight. So that was what I did for most of my late intermediate and high school years. Is I just borrowed a couple of LPs and listened to them both while I was doing my homework at night, took them back, got out another two, and so, you know, by the time, you know, I was 15, you know, I'm up to Mahler symphonies and all that sort of stuff, and that interest kind of and carried on through, you know, the Bruckner and the Shostakovich and everything else that I could find, lay my hands on, basically. Also found that you could borrow scores from the public library, so I taught myself to follow scores after 6 months of losing my place all the time. And yeah, so that was it. So I obviously went on to do music at high school, had to do 6th and 7th form through correspondence school, because I was the only person at the high school taking music. So, and I learnt the oboe initially, and then did some piano lessons for a year or so, took on the violin for a while, and then transferred to viola because it was warmer. Yes. And then at the end of my high school years, I discovered the guitar, and having seen the Clean play at Logan Park High School in my last year in 1979, which was frightening and appalling, being in the room with a rock band like that, because they're pretty. And but very soon I found that, okay, penny drop. Very into literature, very into poetry, and you can grab one of these contraptions and write your words and create your structures, and you have a likelihood of it getting heard by people. So yeah, that's pretty much it.
So a huge amount of self-discovery rather than through the schooling itself.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, before we did, I mean, first 3 years at high school, I mean, you know, music teaching back then was kind of like singing along to show tunes for an hour and bored everybody stupid with, you know, some old biddy whose name I can't remember playing the piano and everyone singing along. So yeah, it was really all self-taught stuff because, you know, I was getting to play, you know, oboe bits from Beethoven symphonies and Brahms symphonies and those sorts of things. So, but you know, I really wanted to get the scores and see how the whole thing.
So you had teachers for those instruments, or they were self-taught?
No, we had itinerant teachers for the instruments, or local teachers in the case of the piano. But yeah, the getting into the classical music was largely self-taught. Yeah.
So that sounds like the moment you discovered composition was when you heard the band at the school and thought, I can create songs too?
Yeah,
that
pretty
was
much.
The magic moment. Yeah.
It sort of took a while to sink in. I think I was just in a state of shock for quite some time, but the Clean went away to Auckland and stripped down to the 3-piece version that everyone knows and loves from the 5-piece version it was, and they got a whole lot better. And then I went to see them again when they came back down from Auckland, and that was the OMG moment, because everything about their songwriting craft had just been so refined and was just so brilliant and inspiring that I got the bug.
Yeah.
Then.
So then you entered the bachelor's degree at Otago, which presumably didn't have any rock music in it at that stage.
No, it didn't. Well, it did. John Drummond, bless him, managed to get a special topics paper on the Beatles through Senate, which was a very difficult thing to do in those days because the people at Senate were going, you can't consider this music worthy of study at a tertiary institution. But he got it through, and it was fantastic, you know. Three semesters over a year, and it was sort of early, middle period and late period across the whole year, and really taking the songs to pieces. So, but aside from that, it was just classical music.
John Drummond taught that course himself?
He taught that course himself, and all the while I was learning composition with Jack Speirs in the more classical vein. Well, adding on from Anthony's talk, you know, in the 1980s it was quite political, really. You know, what do you mean you've got a perfect fifth in your tone row? You can't have that. It will sound tonal. So
Jack was quite strong on serial music.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. It's, you know, and you can kind of understand why. You know, I mean, this, you know, World War II wasn't very long ago back then, and you know, I remember a visiting German composer saying, well, our music has to obey the double negative, the first negative being that it cannot sound like Wagner or Liszt, and the second negative being that it cannot be of use for anything but itself. And so, yeah, it was pretty narrow thinking, and that's all post-World War II history that drove a certain mindset that I think, we've kind of got past that a little bit more. But to a certain extent, that was why I started the band, is because, and I came to blow with Jax. At one point, we had a screaming match because I says, at least can I write like Martineau or Benjamin Britten? He kind of relented after a while. Because I think I was always committed that tonality speaks to people. And I wanted to use that language irrespective of whether or not it was supposedly old hat. And a rock band is the pauper's access to that language, really.
So you had a kind of parallel existence during those years when you were doing the rock music outside the university and studying Western art music in the university.
Yeah, but they're complementary. Because in fact, going back over a lot of songs, especially some of the earlier ones that are quite big, they're actually not songs, they're sonatas. They've got key relationships that do what sonata does. It slingshots form into time to make them sizable things. So everything I was learning from classical music, I really wanted to grab hold of that, the use. I wanted the sonata principle in my kit bag because I felt I needed it. Early on, some of the bigger Verlaines songs are kind of like monotonal. And they derive their duration from other things going on in them, but I quickly discovered that I needed key relationships to get the architecture of the things that I had in my head. In fact, it's my wife, Jo, after I've been messing around with a song for 6 months and only getting as far as the first verse, or the intro and the first verse, and she says, go back to school. I'm sick of hearing you get this song this far and not finish it. And that was the problem, was that it wasn't a song at all, it was a sonata, and kind of in structure, and so it ended up, okay, so I need to do this, need to do it in the dominant, and then how do you play it in the tonic again? Okay. A lot of that type of stuff, so very complimentary.
I remember reading somewhere someone asking you why Mahler, and you were commenting that Mahler wrote great songs, and this for you was a source of inspiration.
Well, yeah, Mahler is a great songwriter. He's often my go-to guy when I'm making an album and collecting it together. And it's kind of like, well, I want my albums to be as kind of on a Das Lied von der Erde. Why not? It's just got drums behind it, that's the only difference, but in terms of depths of utterances and things, it's kind of,
So you must be quite unique as a rock musician to have a PhD in Western art music and someone like Mahler. Have you encountered other musicians who have a similar background?
Quite a few more than you'd think, actually. Not necessarily having a PhD in Mahler or a PhD in anything to do with music, but with doing the radio shows that I've been doing over the last couple of years on 9 to Noon, and doing a bit of bio study, and you kind of go, okay, so yeah, he's reading Nietzsche as well, and so's he, and they're talking at parties, aren't they? The David Bowers and the, whatever, they're reading stuff. That's where it's come from. They're reading lots of stuff, and their listening habits are quite wide as well. You can tell that a band like Radiohead doesn't arrive at OK Computer without some serious thought behind what they're doing, and they even advertise it quite subtly. In one video I've seen, which has Tallinn as a town, of course it's referencing over Piet, because they borrow his musical language all the time. And even their websites, point direction at various modern composers that they're into. So it's not as, Graham Humphreys, whenever we meet from the Abel Tasmans, we're talking Beethoven sonatas. If I'm talking to Shane Carter, who put an album out the year before last with him playing the piano, an instrument he doesn't know how to play or hasn't learned, and he plays everything with one finger, writes these amazing songs, but we converse in opus numbers when it comes to the piano sonatas and the late quartets, He knows that stuff. And, composers tend to be very wide listeners, because we're always desperate for stuff, because we're magpies. We grab a harmony there, or, why does the hair on the back of my neck stand up? Right there. And, oh, really? Okay. Go and get the score and have a look. You just stockpile these things away, and then you kind of copy them, but they're kind of, as a technique, they're there for you to access should you need to.
So I just want to ask you a couple of questions about Jack Speirs, who was my neighbour for a few years down in Dunedin, and I knew him pretty well. And when he tragically died, there was a memorial service a few months later, and you wrote a string quartet for that occasion, which I played in.
Yeah.
But this must be quite a rare thing for you, a chamber work?
Well, I wrote a bunch of stuff in my undergraduate composition portfolios, and a few things got played. And it was an occasional piece. And
is there any Jack Speirs in there, his influence?
There's quite a bit of influence of Verlaines. Well, it's subtitled Conversations with Verlaines and Shostakovich. Shostakovich being, I suppose, the 20th century composer it gravitated towards for obvious reasons, for him speaking through a tonal, a broadly tonal language. And I'd always appreciated the Verlaines that I knew in terms of its just organisational rigour, which I think is where Jack came from. But yeah, it's kind of, I've never felt compelled to write more works in the so-called classical vein, because I've been so busy most of the time with composing my own material. And the other work was a work that was commissioned for the album Pluck by harpist Helen Webby. So, so I was asked to do it. I said, sure, okay. So I knocked that out, and it's an okay piece, I think.
So maybe you can tell us a little bit about the story of the Verlaines, when it began, how much it's changed over the years personnel-wise, and how much your own style has changed or evolved.
Well, I think the first song I wrote might have been, I can't remember, 1979 or 80, in a response to a tragedy too, and I've just felt compelled to do it, as you do, a suicide, so, you kind of try and put your thoughts and emotions down, and so I did, and having written one song, it was a case of, I like doing this, let's write another one. The band sort of loosely started in '79, but it was just me and another guy. It wasn't a fully fledged band. And we eventually became a 5-piece, and we did 2 shows. But 2 of them were getting really nerdy about their studies, so I kind of booted them out in '81, and we became a 3-piece band. And then soon after, the lineup solidified around Jane Dodd and Robbie Yates, and we continued on till about '87. And that's where a lot of the seminal Verlaines output with that lineup is associated with that lineup, because it was a pretty good band, just the 3 of us, and amazing chemistry. Total fluke now is that, of course, we're all living in Dunedin, and since Flying Nun re-released something in 2014, and I said to Jane, well, how about it? Can you remember how to play the songs? And she says, rung up a day later, says, yeah, just put the record on, it's all come back in muscle memory. I know every note is. So we did a show in Auckland where for the first time we played Hallelujah, the first proper Verlaines album, live. And we also did a show in Wellington at the 2016 New Zealand Festival, which you can dial up. It was recorded. Radio New Zealand recorded it, so you can go look and search that on the Radio New Zealand site. You can hear us playing. You can be transported back to 1987, roughly. We had line-up changes after that. We ended up signing to Slash in the United States, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and did an album in '91 and '93 with them. didn't sell so well, so we got dropped and we came back to New Zealand. We did an album under our own steam in 96. I did a solo album which came out in 2001, I think, and then had a hiatus for quite some period while I was starting the degree program up in Dunedin, because it was pretty full on inventing new papers and content and but one of my bass players, well, the most recent one, said, "How about it?" So I said, "Yeah, okay, I've been writing some songs." So we did another album in 2007, which was okay. The songs were good, but I felt disappointed in my own performance. I wasn't, rock and roll's physical. You have to get in shape to do it properly, and I wasn't in shape. So I just basically wrote another album the following summer, and we recorded that, and it came out in 2009. And then the following summer, wrote another one that came out in 2011. And the following album, wrote another album, and we recorded that, but didn't mix it. The following album, write another album in the summer, and decided, oh well, it's the 10th studio album, so let's make it a double album. So we recorded that, and that's the new record, really. It's
just released
from 2012 and 13. It's just been released in digital format.
A strong element of protest in here, or statement at least on the world situation.
Well, it's not something I ever did, or any of my comrades ever did, back in the 80s, and then politics was going on with, in a big way, with all the, the end of the Muldoon era and the whole nuclear thing and the nuclear-free stuff. I mean, New Zealand was really going through a cultural, political adolescence at that time, but we didn't write about it. Some other artists did, but we tended to keep towards our own just emotional things as our orbit. But, you kind of, it comes with age, the penny drops sort of around when you turn 50, and you just sort of go, I've seen this crap before, and no one's got any way of stopping it, but at least, you might be able to say something about it. So, I mean, a lot of the songs that are on the new record, as I say, were written around a period that was, it was the re-election of Barack Obama in the 2012 elections, and I couldn't really kind of stop my complete indifference. I remember where I was in 2008. I remember the chair I was sitting on watching the results come in, and I remember the tear, because it's goodbye Bush, and maybe by 2012, at least the other schmo didn't win. It was kind of, and we're actually kind of in that right now. We're seeing it everywhere with Brexit, or the Gilets Jaunes march, what's happening in Hong Kong. I mean, there's a collapse going on in terms of trust that politicians can deliver anything. So, I feel like I can put the words on paper, I can put my thoughts down, and it's always a dodgy subject, because what gives you the right to do this? And it's kind of, well, I feel a kind of responsibility because I can, because I know other people feel it. And the story I always relate, I was talking to an English class, poetry and music. I was a guest lecturer last week, and that question came up and says, well, here's the story that I always cite. Is Anna Akhmatova, the Soviet or Russian poetess, her work was banned. She survived by doing translations. They didn't attack her directly, but they put her son in jail, and so she had to line up with the food parcels every day, like so many people did. She's lined up one day with her food parcel, and someone recognised who she is. And this woman said to her, "Do you have words for this?" And Akhmatova said, "Yes, I do." And the story goes that something approximating a smile came over the other woman's face. And that's kind of why I feel, okay, if I can say it, if I feel I can nail it, it's a case of hopefully someone will say thank you. I've been thinking that too, and that says something that I've been concerned about.
So your song AWD AWCWD, that was written actually between the
As
last two presidents.
yeah, it was looking well. It was predictive of the next one.
Yep.
You know, situations vacant. 2016. I was looking 4 years ahead. AWCWD. It hasn't. No one's twigged on to what it means, even though.
I know, because I listened to your interview.
It's my interview. Yeah. Well, you know, and it's increasing. It's become actually. Well, it's any war criminal will do, is what it stands for, and I was predicting that because no matter what the election promises and pledges that someone like Obama made in 2008, by 2012 he hadn't achieved any of them. And I was predicting essentially that he wouldn't be able to in the next 4 years either, and the next person wouldn't be able to either. And whatever we may think or individually about the current president, Mr. Trump, at least from time to time he's candid. About August last year, and he says, I'm pulling the troops out of Syria. And then the next day he's saying, the place went crazy, I couldn't do it. You know? He's very candid. He's saying so, he's pulling them out of Syria as of this morning. There was a tweet saying, we've got to end these endless wars. Who knows what price he's going to have to pay for that, but anyway, because, you know.
So this is something that's changed over the decades as your engagement with politics.
Well, yes. I mean, you know, who could have predicted an 18-year war in Afghanistan? Because that's how long it's been there, you know. Okay, if you think of the first Gulf War, it was kind of, well, actually military done proper. Limited, get those rat bags out of Kuwait. That's it, done. Limited objective, take the troops home. But, you know, I think I have a responsibility as an artist to kind of like, well, you know, keep up with where it's going. We live in bloody dangerous times, thank you very much, you know, with things that are happening with, and we, you know, we came through as young people that whole period, and you know, we came of age in the early 80s where the things like nuclear winters and things were first raised, that we're kind of like doubly, you know, even if you don't get one yourself, it's going to make life uninhabitable, and you know, and then we signed, you know, Gorbachev and Reagan got together and signed some INF treaties to get rid of all the intermediate stuff to make accidents go away, or at least, you know, so you only got the intercontinental ones, which take longer and a certain amount of mad to hold the whole thing together. And then, you know, a nut job comes along and tears them up. We should be frightened. We should be very frightened. It's you know, it's a scary, and with the pressure of climate change and all those sorts of things, it's a very scary time that we're in.
Perhaps we can change tack here, and you can take us through some examples of some of the pieces, some of the songs. We can have a listen, talk about them. What can we have a look at?
What can we have a look at? Well, let's have a listen to track one. That's easy. None of these chords. There's an interesting backstory to it.
Well, tell us the story.
Well, it's sort of a Dunedin Sound sort of a song. And the reason is that I wrote the riff in 1981. And it hung around for years and years, and I could never use it. Could never find a use for it, could never find a lyric for it. And then I wrote this poem about, you know, none of these chords I own, I only gave them temporary shelter. Like piles of bones, I found them stacked in dusty corners, because chords still convey when long since the dust has blown away. And it's kind of like brilliant, and I just... my eureka moment. That old riff, you know, it's about the riff itself is almost the love of chords of themselves. It's a wonderful kind of Lydian mode type thing with an F natural in C, it's an F sharp, but then an F natural, which is a real Dunedin Sound thing of having modes collide like that as a kind of tension creating duration, creating device.
After this, I'll ask you a few questions about the Dunedin Sound.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
have a listen.
So anyway, here's none of these chords.
shelter. Like piles of bones, I found them stacked in dusty corners. 'Cause chords remain when long since the dust has blown away. In second-hand stores, forgotten library shelves, in books unread in 100 years, save 2 other guys and recently myself. Chords still convey when long since the dust has blown away. And when I'm gone, these chords will rise and scatter to the winds for strange young men to gather in and make whatever they will with them, or maybe entice a girl to bed with the mystery and the mastery. Oh, maybe he'll go further still, or then again maybe she will. Comedian, custodian, historian, casket raider. None of these chords I own, I only gave them temporary shelter. Like piles of bones, I found them stacked in dusty corners. Relied upon the stars that guide a crazy sailor home. When all's decay, when dust we are, then only chords remain.
Hey, love the lyrics.
Yeah, I wrote it 6 months before Lord broke. Entice a girl to bed with the mystery and the mastery, or then again, maybe he'll go further still, or then again, maybe she will.
Tell us about Dunedin Sound.
Right, well, it's a sound, partly born of the fact that we had cheap gear, and if you've got drums, bass, and guitar, chances are it's going to sound quite similar, especially with a very strummy style. High levels of quite bright dissonance of the type that's there. If you've got a B chord with open B and an E string, you've kind of got the D sharp grating against the E. It's sort of a sound that everybody used and employed, and a melodic shape. But, the last 5 years I've been doing these tally-ho gigs, and that was in connection with Roy Colbert And our theory was that the songs are great and the sound's got nothing to do with it. The sound was accidental. I mean, rock bands are poverty talking. You know, we were always a three-piece band because that was the minimum number of people: drums, bass, me, guitar, singer. I never wanted to be a singer anyway because I'm not a good singer. But you know, oh, you wrote it, you have to sing it, all right. You know, and you know, because every time you become a four-piece band, like the economics of the thing just gets completely. You make it a five-piece band and forget it. You know, it's just too expensive to move people around. So when we were in the studio, I was always getting, you know, cellists and horn section, well, a horn player and or saxophone, or doubling things up and layering things up. So the Verlaines records are actually quite orchestral anyway. Although playing them live, it's just the three of us sort of, you know, trying to get through the narrative. So, but what the tally-ho thing proved, I think, is that it actually, the Dunedin Sound really is not a sound so much. It was a school of songwriting with a very high bar indeed of expertise that everyone just kind of more or less, without really knowing it, kept doing that. I think Shane Carter said it best. He says you'd go to the Captain Cook on Saturday night waiting to get your butt kicked. It's in the early 80s because that's what was happening. You know, someone would just write, you know, a song that kind of blew everything else out the water, and everyone had to try harder, and it just kind of worked like that. So, you know, I mean, and oftentimes a lot of the work that happens in Dunedin Sound songs is not through the lyrics; it's through the music, and they're not guitar solos; they're instrumental sections. And maybe we can play Submarine Bells from Tally-Ho, and you can have a listen to it. Before we do, I mean, this is Martin Phillips, Annalise, and three other backing vocalist singers, so it's sort of a five-part harmony thing. And, you know, the song is about a relationship that is now impossible, even though it's cherished and dear. Semi-autobiographical, I think, written from a time when Martin was sort of touring in England or basing himself in Europe, and how can you run a relationship under those circumstances? And it's about something dissolving. And he even uses the word dissolution. And the lyrics go through in a kind of verse-chorus pattern, and then there's a pause, and then there's four distinct musical sections. First one kind of dissolves the harmony by being pan-diatonic with the extra chord tones. The next one dissolves the meter by changing every one. And then the next one has pan-diatonicism and changing meter. And then the voice comes back in after that musical expression of dissolution to the most powerful emotional effect possible. And but it's the music that's done all the work of, you know, the text in a way is just reiterating the nuts and bolts of the, well, this is how it is situation, but the music. And it's just first-class composing, you know. It's first class.
Snow will lights as dark sea grows, then far below lies softly glowing. Snow turns slowly into water. I know deep down, hidden in you, submarine bells chime. Gold and groaning, sunlit tonings, submerged sounds sublime. So the colder, deeper tolling reaches dissolution. You wish a vicious whirlpool goes swirling round and round. I can watch in wonder as your gaze shifts past my shoulder. Just a glimpse, abyss that flashes at me. I know deep down, hidden in submarine bells chime. Gold and groaning, sunlit toning, submerged sound sublime.
Since the weakest current throws it, someday I may lose this, immersed in words and miss you, kiss foaming waves goodbye. Deep and dark my submarine bells grow in greens and grey. Mine would chime 1,000 times to make you feel okay.
So that's as good a lesson, I think, as any is what, so, because everybody did this. They either had instrumentals proper or very large instrumental sections within the songs communicated a lot of the poetic idea rather than just the text doing it. Well, I mean, I've been lecturing on these things for donkeys, so I know what people's proclivities are. But that's also a reason why they took to being orchestrated like a duck to water. Because in a way they are semi-symphonic in the way that they're conceived. And with the opportunity arising to do it, I couldn't say no, because I respect the work of the Martins and Shanes and the David Kilgours that I grew up with and was inspired by, because they're amazing composers, they're amazing musicians in their own right, and just a privilege to be able to stand backstage and hear that through the door and then go out and the crowd's going completely nuts.
We've got time maybe for one more short one, then we'll have some questions from the floor. What would you like?
Okay. Well, maybe track 2 of the album, Church and State. It's a pair. The AWCWD one, I wrote the 2 lyrics together and decided, having just seen Leonard Cohen play live and thinking he probably wouldn't be here forever, to adopt his register, the lowest I could get. So it's basically an A flat minor. And again, from that same period of the second election of Obama, and kind of coming to the conclusion that really it's just politics and church. Right. It's religion and politics sort of rammed together. It's kind of more about belief than it is about anything else, and it's certainly not about policy. And no one's going to talk about climate change, and just so anyway. So this is Church and State, which features Libby Hamilton, an ex-student, on backing vocals, and also Shane Carter, a guest appearance in the bridge section. And yes, its catchphrase kind of, I think, sums up where we're at the moment, which is thank God they gave us Jesus.
Hey, dogs obeyed in office. Every sturdy limb gets hobbled. Thank God they gave us Jesus. Thank God they gave us Jesus. Another empty
Let's have some questions from the floor for Graeme.
What's the relationship between words and music in your work? And is one ever more important than the other?
I used to write these enormous tonal narratives on guitar and then work for 6 months or a year sometimes to get a text to fit with it. And sort of in 2007 I went, this is mad. Why not do it the way Schubert and Schumann did it and write the text first, because then you let it call the shots about what the tempo and register, and you're much less likely to make a square peg round hole. So I'm very attached to my poems as poems, because that's what I do for the year. I just get, you get scraps of time in academia, as academics know. You go, half an hour before the next meeting. I wonder what that poem was working on. What was that like last week? And you get it up and you save as version 8 and tweak a few things and keep all the versions. And then hopefully you open it up one day and you're not annoyed by anything. And then you can set it to music because it's done. So it's pretty equal. I mean, I think, the poem is about setting everything you want to say where every line is necessary and has the same voltage. And then you find where is the right music for that. It's not about pursuing originality for originality's sake or anything. It's for something like that. It's it's primary chords for the verses, because you're talking about things that are pretty ugly, really. There's some beautiful bits in the chorus and at the end of the bridge with a whole lot of musical sophistication in it, but it's all about making the music move very, very quickly towards the top note, and then disappointingly it falls one and then trudges down back to the basement, which is kind of like Hope You Can Believe In. No, not really. It's the musical equivalent thereof, that's what I'm composing. So yeah, they're equally important, I spend a lot of time editing poems, and I know what I want to do as a composer with something like that. And it took a whole afternoons of faffing about with different diminished sevenths and whatever else to get it to flow and hit the right marks, and then hit the German 6 and down to 1C5 and off we go. Yeah. But so sometimes I spend a lot of time on music, and as I say, a lot of music's hung around for a long time. A lot of songs actually that I've done over the last few years have been music that I wrote ages ago. Never found a lyrical home for them.
Another question?
I'm interested in the idea of the composer and how a lot of composers work really hard to get their work out and have perform multiple times, whereas we're sort of on the opposite. Even being trained in that school, you're sort of on the opposite end of that spectrum, where you compose pop music that's sort of meant to be accessible and meant to speak to people and sort of align with various thoughts and beliefs, and if you pick it up, great, and if you don't. But do you feel like you get quite a lot of feedback? Do you feel like that changes the way that you compose? Do you feel like this interaction with the popular world of being on that side of sort of pop music is?
Well, I don't get a lot of feedback.
Yeah, personally.
I sort of do this to keep my hand in a way to be able to supervise students that are writing songs at higher levels, at 400 level, or students that are doing a DMA. That's one of the reasons why I do what I do. I mean, we're not well known or popular. I mean, our heyday's well and truly gone, because it's a young person's. I'm not going to go and tour America and play every night for 30 nights at my age, especially if you're driving a van and packing the gear in and out every day, which you did, as a 30-year-old, no trouble at all. But you don't do it as a 59-year-old. That sort of stuff is stress and furniture removal. So we just work in the studio, really.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's interesting where your music gets to, because I remember hearing Way Up Where.
No, okay.
When I was young, my uncle was a member of the Cranks, and so we had albums all over the place of sort of odd music and things that you wouldn't usually hear. I remember that album.
Yeah. That's where our fan base largely is in the United States, because this country's so small, anyways. It's almost not worth worrying about in terms of press vinyl to sell in New Zealand. But we had a relationship with an independent record company that wanted to release some of our stuff, and So they released an album called Bird Dog, and they did that in 1987, I think it is. And it went to number 4 on the college charts in America, so they sold an awful lot. Not that we ever saw a cent, but that's another thing entirely. But yeah, so, you know, and then what else have you got? And they released our other albums at about 6-7 months apart. And so, yeah, we do have a following. People know who we are or who I am. Yeah, but it's, these days I'm more likely to be able to play this solo in a show and get the band together, 2 of whom live in Auckland, and the other 3 of us are in Dunedin. We're really a studio band. In fact, the 1987 version of the band has played more often in the last 3 or 4 years than that band. We've only played a couple of times, so.
Well, I think we're going to have to bring it to a close there, but probably the only opportunity in my life I'll interview a rock star. So thanks so much for joining us.